So yeah, I think it's probably easiest. We'll start off with some slides, and I'm going to give you a super high-level overview of what we've done, where we're going, who I am, who the company is, what cultured meat is. And then certainly we can get into the details through questions after that. So starting with something that many of you probably already know, so meat, it's the central ingredient in pet food. Our cats and dogs evolved eating it, and in the wild, it is the only single source of complete nutrition for our pets. For this reason, the market, the demand for meat-based pet food is huge. In 2019, Americans spent $37 billion feeding their cats and dogs, and this number is expected to jump to $118 billion globally by 2025. But of course, this demand for meat has come with some pretty devastating consequences, including the development of antibiotic-resistant pathogens, grotesque animal cruelty, climate change. It is a very long list for a single industry. And in addition to our current meat supply chain being unsustainable, it is also highly unstable, as has been exposed most recently by the emergence of COVID-19 and those meat shortages that followed thereafter. Meat for pet food in particular is also problematic for our pets. Every year, multiple times a year, the FDA issues recalls on pet food, typically due to bacterial or chemical contamination. The way that meat is currently processed for pet food, it's subjected to very, very high heats and temperatures, which means that most of the essential nutrients that would otherwise be found in meat are lost. And that means that those nutrients have to then be added back to the pet food as a supplemental form. And then the other issue is that the main allergens actually for our cats and dogs are bovine and poultry protein. Nonetheless, they are the main ingredients in most pet food. Largely because, of course, they come from the human food supply chain. So for these reasons, this is really where Because Animals comes in. We recognize the nutritional value of meat when it comes to feeding our cats and dogs. So for this reason, we are not creating a meat alternative. We are creating meat, just with an alternative means by which it is produced. So for us, that means making cultured meat. So very, very high level explanation of what that is. In a one-time scenario, we take some cells from an animal. We then grow those cells, we provide them with all of the vitamins, minerals, protein, all the nutrients they need to grow. And we do this inside a vessel that's warm and allows for gas exchange. So in an animal, this would be a womb. For us, we call it a bioreactor. And in the end, we harvest a product that nutritionally speaking is the same as it is meat. We just get it in a different way. And so we actually, at Because Animals, started with mouse being the ancestral diet of the cat. So in the wild, cats eat mice, they eat small birds, and they eat insects. As I mentioned, bovine or chicken and beef are the main components of most commercial pet food, but they're the main allergens. So in making cultured meat, we really saw this as an opportunity to actually grow the protein source that is most evolutionarily appropriate for our pets. So that's mouse for cats, and we'll be working on rabbit for dogs. We've also worked on basically formulating that nutritional media, so that specific blend of vitamins, minerals, protein, as I mentioned previously, that blend of nutrients that those cells need to really grow and thrive. We formulated that ourselves. Maybe some of you are already familiar with this, but cultured meat historically, or tissue grown in a lab for biomedical reasons or whatever, commonly an ingredient used is called fetal bovine serum. Of course, this is an animal-based ingredient, and it's something that we were not going to use in our media, so in our nutritional media. So we have taken that out of the equation. Our nutrient media formulation is entirely animal-free, and we are continuing to drop the cost of that media through various optimization experiments to actually get that media down to a cost that will allow us to be commercially viable as a company. We also have a bioprocess engineer on our team who's actually making all of the infrastructure that we will need to ultimately scale our product. And this is just an example of one of the little tiny bioreactors, very small, because basically what we're doing, of course, is we're testing many permutations and variations of growth conditions by way of both media as well as the type of vessel that we grow ourselves in. And then as we optimize and we find just that perfect combination, then we can start to scale up. So we start small and then we continue to scale. And so what we're left with then is a product ultimately that has all of the advantages of meat, but without any of the negative consequences that are associated with traditional animal-based meat. And in fact, we can say that it's even better because we can grow our meat without the inclusion of any antibiotics, which is not the case for the vast majority of meat, certainly in the US in any case. So we've seen that there is already massive demand for plant-based products as well as cultured meat products for human food. But why did we focus on pet food? So unlike humans who are omnivores, cats are obligate carnivores, meaning that in the wild, they really do need to consume another animal in order to obtain all of their nutrients. So where a company, a plant-based company, so again, thinking about the US, a company like Beyond Meat, which is plant-based, they will always be a really healthy competitor against a cultured meat company that's has designs to feed humans, like, for example, Finless Foods. However, this competition does not exist for pets because people want to feed their pets meat. So that plant-based competition just simply won't exist. So for people who really do want to feed their pets a truly humane and environmentally sustainable diet that is meat-based, their only option is cultured meat. The other cool thing about cultured meat for pet food is that we don't have to worry about any of those, basically creating that three-dimensionality. So where humans want a steak that looks like a steak, it sits on the grill and sizzles like a steak, for us, that's not an issue. We can grow up our cells in suspension. We then harvest that tissue and blend it with other ingredients to make a wet food or a kibble that pets and pet parents are already familiar with. So in this way, scaling cultured meat for pet food is actually faster and cheaper than it would be for human food. And as I mentioned, we stand to make a safer and healthier product for our pets as well, both because we don't add any of those traditional growth promoting steroids or antibiotics to the meat, but also because we can actually, we don't have to subject our meat to those high temperatures and pressures to sterilize the meat the way the animal agriculture industry does. So we can preserve the natural nutrients in that food when we make it. The other, okay, and so, but there's another big reason why, at least I personally and my co-founder at Because Animals chose to focus on pet food, cultured meat for pet food rather than human food, and that is simply because, yeah, a humane and environmentally sustainable meat-free or meat-based food for our pets simply does not exist. And as humans, of course, we can eat, and we do eat plant-based, and it's absolutely healthy and fine for us. In fact, it's better. But for pets, that's not the case. And there can be some challenges around feeding cats, in particular, a plant-based diet, usually mostly around palatability and actually just getting those cats to eat it. That's the main hurdle. But that's another story. So a couple of myths that I would like to dispel in this discussion today as well. And one is that the current pet food industry uses leftovers from the human food supply chain, and therefore no animals are actually killed for pet food, and therefore it's okay to feed our pets, or it's not going to make a difference if we feed our pets meat from factory farms. So this is actually just false, blatantly false. Almost all premium and ultra premium brands of pet food today use a human grade or a very close to human grade meat. And basically what this means is it's meat that would, or animals that would or could have been raised for human consumption. So these are animals, and this is meat that is competing directly with the human food supply chain. These are not leftovers. The second thought is that pet food is actually an environmentally sustainable industry, though. So although I just mentioned that there are many brands that do use human grade meat, Still, the vast majority, it's true, they do rely on what's referred to as byproducts, or it's actually referred to in the industry as 4D meat. So this is meat that comes from animals that are dead, diseased, dying, or disabled. Many animals are referred to as fallen animals, don't ever make it to slaughter. They die during transit, or suffocation, or dehydration, infection. And if an animal doesn't actually get to slaughter and it dies beforehand, this animal cannot be fed fur. It cannot go into the human food supply chain. So instead, any animal that is 4D or fallen, or any of those cuts of meat that people don't want to eat, all of this meat is then shunted to something called a rendering facility. And so by the time this meat, which is, of course, meat is very nutritious, right? So meat, it's not only fed upon by humans and animals, but also microbes. So when this meat gets to these rendering facilities, it's basically, it's a breeding ground for pathogens. And so it's heavily contaminated. And for these reasons, it needs to be subjected to these high heats and pressures in order to sterilize it. And that's where all those nutrients are lost. But the key point here, though, is that so the argument has been made that it's in a sustainable practice in this way. But if the animal agriculture was unable to actually use this meat for pet food, then they would actually have to pay to have it disposed of as biohazardous waste, because remember, it's very, very, very heavily decomposed at this point. So it would actually be quite costly for the industry. So pet food, in essence, is a very, very large profit arm for the animal agriculture industry. And the reality is that in the absence of being able to sell this meat for pet food, animal agriculture, as we know it, simply couldn't exist. And the other, there have been studies that have shown that pets, or pet food, actually is a huge contributor in and of itself to environmental devastation. A few years back, there was a researcher from UCLA who published a paper that modeled out that pets in the US, upwards of a quarter of the environmental effects of the animal agriculture industry are directly attributed to the foods that Americans feed their cats and dogs. So this is a really huge issue that has, by and large, gone unacknowledged because people are so focused on the damage that humans are doing that people don't really think much about why we need to really be thinking about upending the pet food industry. So for all of those reasons, I have total conviction that cultured meat is really, or pet food is really the ideal application of cultured meat, especially in these early days. And what we're doing is not science fiction. We've already grown cultured meat. We've already fed it to cats. And now what we're focused on really is that scaling part so that we are commercially viable and so we can start making a difference as soon as possible. At the moment, I've heard that there are over 80, 85 companies around the world that are making cultured meat or some component of cultured meat. But still to this day, because Animals is the only company specifically making cultured meat for pet food. So I'm very excited to say we will be first to market. We have our proprietary cell lines for mouse. We're working on one for rabbit. We're almost done with that media optimization to grow our cells. And now we're really working on that scaling process and building that infrastructure. The other really, I'd say the other really unique thing about Because Animals as a startup is that in addition to building out this revolutionary biotech, we are also building a brand at the same time. So we don't aspire to just sort of sell our products to an existing large pet food corporation. We will be selling them ourselves under our own brand. And we see this as really, really critical. For the reason that cultured meat, of course, is by and large, it's a wholly new ingredient. People don't know what it is, and there's going to be a lot of confusion and the need for a lot of explanation. And so that's why when we launched our company, we also launched first some early products referred to as bridge products. So we launched a probiotic-based supplement, one for dogs and one for cats. And then a couple of years later, nutritional yeast-based dog cookie line of them. And we're about to have another flavor in the very near future. But basically what we're doing with these other cultured ingredients like probiotics and nutritional yeast is we're using these ingredients to tell the story of what cultured meat is. So these ingredients that people are already familiar with the health benefits of, we can say, look, cultured meat is actually grown in a way that's very, very similar to how probiotics, bacteria are grown, to how nutritional yeast or yeast is grown. The process is very, very, very similar. And then we're, of course, looking to eventually, ideally, have a very limited batch launch of our first cultured mouse cat treat in 2022. And this is not, this is not impossible. So I think we did see at the end of 2020, Just was the first company to receive, in terms of cultured meat, was the first company to receive regulatory approval for their cultured chicken in Singapore, and they did start selling it. So this was a wonderful precedent for the entire industry. And so I think we can all feel, we should all feel really excited about the reality that this is happening. It is not pie in the sky, and it's closer than most of us think. So at Because Animals, really our mission is to take animals out of the supply chain and to dominate pet food globally, I have to say, by basically offering people the healthiest, the safest, the most humane, and environmentally sustainable pet food there is. So a little bit about me, I'm almost done. I have a PhD in biochemistry, and I stopped eating meat when I was when I was young, in my early teens, and I think I would have stopped earlier if my dad had let me, but he's a bit old school. And so it was a long time ago, I stopped eating meat and started volunteering in with animal rescue when probably my late teens. And then I did that through my entire adult life. And so while I was working on my PhD and sorry, I'd be at the bench during the day. I was trained as a biochemist, and in the evenings I'd be doing things related to cat rescue, TNR, trap, neuter, release. There's a lot of feral cats in Toronto, which is where I'm from. And I didn't ever really see an opportunity for my science and my this need that I had to do what I could in terms of helping animals. I didn't see any opportunity for those things to come together until I was working as a postdoctoral fellow at Stanford University. And this is truly an amazing place in the world where anything and everything is possible. And it was there that I decided that I was going to dedicate my scientific career to taking animals out of the supply chain. And I met my co-founder, who, as it happens, also volunteered at Cat Rescue. And he had just finished his MBA. And we were both looking for a way to do something that actually helped not only our pets, but of course other animals in the environment. So that was 5 years ago now. Since then, we've grown out our team to include a couple of PhD level stem cell scientists, a bioprocess engineer, several technicians, a trained journalist, and a growth marketer. And yeah, with this amazing team, we're all working towards this mission of taking animals out of the supply chain and providing pets with a humane, ethical, meat-based, but animal-free diet. So that's it for me.